So stances, kicks, and the high and low points of your training. That is today's topic as we answer some Q&A questions from our viewers. And before we get started, mark on your calendar. Next week, Tuesday, November 2nd, we are releasing our History of 𝗘𝗫𝗧 episode. We had great help from the 𝗘𝗫𝗧 philosopher and 𝗠𝗘𝗠𝗦𝗓, and we are excited to bring this episode to you. So mark your calendars, click on the bell icon, subscribe so you can get that notification when it drops. And while you're clicking that bell, please be on the lookout for some live streams. We've been adding more of those to the channel because we really like engaging with all of you. We've had some good discussions going, so we're going to keep doing that going forward. Okay, let's get started. The first question comes from 𝗘𝗫𝗖𝗘𝗧𝗧. What is your opinion of kicking while being on the balls of your feet? I have one instructor that believes your weight should be on your heels, while I have another instructor that stresses staying on the balls of your feet. This is actually a really good question, and I don't think there's necessarily a specific yes or no answer to this because it's going to come down to a couple of things. The first is the style that you're training, the purpose that you are training for, and what type of kicks you're doing. And when you say on the balls of your feet, do you mean like bouncing, or do you mean when you're kicking that your heel is lifted off the ground with each kick? Because if it's a bouncing thing, if you're always kind of moving on the balls of your feet, then that suggests to me a competition style. It could be Taekwondo, Korean, or some sort of tournament point-based sparring. So if there's a lot of bouncing and staying light on the balls of your feet, that's usually for really quick, explosive speed techniques, tap, get a point, move back. So a lot of movement, a lot of quick snapping motions. Now, if you're talking about whether you're on the ball of your foot or flat-footed when you kick, that's a little bit of a different story, and I think that depends specifically on the kick that you're doing. If you're throwing something like a front kick, or a side kick, or maybe even a back kick. If your foot is planted when you throw those kicks, you can use the ground as sort of a push-off point, and it also creates a little bit more of a bracing angle. So that way you've got a little bit more solid impact to your kicks, especially if you're driving hard forward. If you're doing something along the lines of a round kick, then yes, you're gonna wanna be on the ball of your foot for the pivot because one, you wanna preserve your knees and your hips and your joints. So you wanna actually get the right rotation. You wanna pivot properly into your kick. And when you pivot with a round kick, most starters do this by pivoting on the ball of your foot, and you want to turn your foot almost sideways as you're throwing that kick. That gets you that range of motion. Now, I have seen variations of people who stay on the ball of their foot, or people who will rotate on the ball of their foot, and as they're planting or as they're about to deliver the kick, they plant for that hit. In terms of general fighting, like if you're in a fighting stance in a real life situation, I think it might be better just to stay flat-footed on even ground because you don't want to be bouncing around so much, and you kind of want to be solid, almost like in the boxer stance, because when something actually happens, then you can make the decision, you can respond correctly, you can move, you can pivot if you need to, but you want to be planted, you want to be solid, so that way you're prepared for a lot of different variables. But as far as when it comes to kicking, it's going to come down to your kicks, it's going to come to the instructor. So I would say both your instructors are correct. Ask them why. Ask them, if there's any exceptions, or if the rotation or not rotation is based on specific kicks. That's where the difference is going to lie in. The next question comes from Bryce Keeney. Follow through or snap techniques, which is better? I say both have their place in use. I'm going to agree with this. I think you kind of answered your own question right there. Both have their place in use. And this is not that unrelated to the ball versus planting question in terms of it comes down to specifically what are you doing, what's your purpose, and the style. I like to equate, or at least look at things kind of like the jab cross. So your kicks with your legs, you got your front leg and you've got your rear leg. Not that dissimilar to your front hand and your rear hand. And the jab cross combination is very, very effective because the jab is the closer hand to your target or to your opponent. It's further up. So you can snap it out there and bring it back really quick. Faster than you can turn and rotate and get that second punch out there. So generally you've got your speed strikes and then you've got your power strikes, your rear driving strikes. And the snapping strikes are really good for setting something up, whether it be a filler move, so you can set up your back strike, or getting someone to move their hand or move their head if you're trying to set them up a certain way. Kicking is very similar. If you're using your front leg for, say, a snapping kick to the groin or a snapping kick to the knee, you're usually trying to set something up. So that kick to the groin, maybe you're bringing their head forward, trying to double them over. Or maybe you're trying to blow out their knee if they're advanced on you, so you're trying to set them up for a more powerful strike to follow. That's if you're using your front leg. So that's kind of how I like to look at it. You can definitely do snapping techniques with your rear leg as well, but it comes down to, again, your objective. Maybe you are doing a harder strike, but you want to return back. So if you're trying to keep your distance, or if you're throwing a kick, remember when you throw kicks too, the higher you throw that kick, the more chance or the more risk that you have that the person might be able to catch it or trap it. So bringing it back as fast as you can might be an advantage. But I would say you pretty much answered your own question, that they both have their purpose. Just realize snapping kicks or snapping techniques are really meant to go out and back really fast. You're either setting something up or you're trying to keep that distance between you, whereas stepping through or follow-throughs, you're advancing. You're trying to drive through that target. The wannabe martial artist asks, can you talk about stances? A lot of people think that low, deep stances are what people use to actually fight, and in today's day of MMA, they don't understand the importance / training of traditional low, deep stances. In Japan, a lot of those lower stances were adapted because we have Gishin Funakoshi, who took Okinawan karate and he was trying to modify it and adapt it to the Japanese culture. He wasn't into competition, he liked the higher stances, but his son was more interested in competition and he started to develop those deep lower stances. So they would actually teach two types of classes. So you saw a lot of these deep stances. You can explode from them. They're great for competition. They're great for building up leg strength. And if you look at a lot of Chinese arts, a lot of older arts, some of those stances make more sense when you put a weapon in it. Imagine you have a long staff or spear. Well, you're going to want a stable base in order to thrust or use it. So you have to ask yourself where those stances are coming from to begin with. As far as like in fighting terms, my opinion again, and of course I welcome any different opinions, but when it comes to fighting, and this is why you see this in MMA so much, I think the narrower, taller stances are a little bit better. And a lot of MMA fighters are in narrower stances because it's a little bit more one-on-one competition is a little bit different because it's based on speed and reaction, and sometimes you can just react better if you're in a higher stance and your weight's not committed low. Now that's in the competition setting. Self-defense could be different. It depends on the scenario. If someone comes at you and just starts swinging at you, attacking you, okay, well again, you might have taller stances. But if someone comes up and grabs you and tries to pick you up, well, by dropping to a deeper stance, anchoring your weight might be beneficial, and it might set you up for a more whatever follow through you have with your system. So there's definitely uses for both, and I think it's important to study each one and where they apply. My opinion, I'd love to hear what you guys think. JV asks, is it important to learn or know the philosophy or history of the martial art you are training in? That's a good question as well, and I really think it comes right back down to what you're doing with your art. If you're only interested in tournaments and competition, then I don't think it's as important. I mean, it's nice to know your lineage, it's nice to know the background and philosophy of your art, but not everybody cares, to be quite frank. That's not everyone's goal to make it a complete lifestyle. Some people just want to learn how to fight. If you're adopting it as a way of life, if you want to become a better person through it, if you're trying to learn your katas, if you're trying to practice your exercise, if you're looking for academic information or even more along the self-defense line, then sometimes you want to know more about the art. Especially I would know about the philosophy. I mean, if you're going to be a lifelong student in school, it helps to know the philosophy and the reason that the art even exists to begin with, because if you're going to align your values with the art and the people who teach the art, you're going to want to know the history and maybe make sure that your beliefs align with the beliefs or the philosophy of the system, so that way you know what you're learning, you know what you're even teaching possibly, and the material will make more sense to you in that fashion. And finally, Georealistic asks, what are the ups and downs someone will experience throughout their martial arts journey? Wow, that is a heavy question. I can only briefly sum it up and use, of course, my own personal experience, but there are a lot of ups and downs to training. And it's like with any other experience in life. There's going to be good moments, there's going to be bad moments. But what are some of the most common ups and downs? Well, the ups, first of all, when you start, that excitement. Novelty is a major motivational factor. People try something new, it's exciting, they're learning, they're kind of getting hooked on it. You see that a lot. Also, whenever you hit certain milestones, getting your black belt is really invigorating and you feel invincible that day. If you're going to go into a competition or a tournament, and if you do very well, that's a very high moment. You get a rush. You're like, oh wow, so I've worked this hard. Look what I was able to do with it. You're going to come across accomplishments that are going to make you feel awesome, and they're going to make your training feel worth it. At the same time, though, there's going to be points that are going to have the opposite effect. That novelty we talked about. So many people start the martial arts. Many people will start a class. So if you have 100 people who join a karate class within a year, or actually within 5 years from that point, you probably have 5 of those people left. Most people, once the novelty wears off, will drop out. So boredom can be a low point. I also found a second drop-off point is usually around the brown belt level or brown belt equivalent, or give or take 4 or 5 years into the art. That is when people start to fall into a lull. You're not seeing as much new material anymore, rather you're refining old material. That's the second major drop-off point that I have noticed in the martial arts. Almost every black belt I know got stuck at the brown belt level, myself included. That can be demoralizing sometimes, and a lot of people get bummed out and they can drop out from that. You have to find a way to reinvigorate yourself, or else you're gonna keep spiraling down. So I find if I get frustrated with something, if I start getting bored with a particular technique or a kata or whatever I'm training on, do something different with it. Look at it from a different perspective. Maybe try it mirrored image, try it backwards, or talk to a different person, research about it. Find something new to dig into to kind of reinvigorate yourself, because sometimes just learning more about what you're doing can be motivational enough. If you guys have noticed, today's questions have been kind of connected by one theme, a duality, you know, this versus this. Should we stand in taller stances or stand in lower stances? Should we follow through with our kicks, or should we do a snapping technique? Do we stay flat-footed? Do we stay on the ball of our feet? Do we learn the history? Do we not learn the history? And what are the highs and the low points? There is a balance, and I believe it doesn't matter what art you're training in, there is a balance to every person. So if you are someone who is feeling during the low point in your martial art, you have to kind of read things and figure out, well, what do you have to do to make it a high point? You have to find the high points and deal with them, because you're going to have the low points. You can't really avoid them. They come together. When it comes to the kicks, you know, you're going to have to read the situation, understand the difference. Why would you be on the balls of your feet versus flat-footed? Why would you snap a technique versus step through? Why would you be in a high stance versus a low stance? So I love all these questions. I love that people are thinking like this, because the moment you stop caring about what you're training is the moment martial arts will no longer work for you.